My mother got a credit card in my dead father's name. The credit report in my hands shook as I stared at the impossible line item. Capital One Venture Card, opened March 15, 2024, current balance, $8,347.92, account holder, Robert Chen, deceased. My father had been dead for 8 months. I'd only pulled his credit report because the estate lawyer, Mr. Davidson, suggested we check for any outstanding debts before finalizing probate. Dad was meticulous with money, the kind of guy who balanced his checkbook to the penny and paid off his credit cards every month without fail. Finding debt in his name seemed about as likely as finding a unicorn in our backyard. But there it was, black ink on white paper, mocking everything I thought I knew about my family. My phone buzzed. Mom's contact photo, her and Dad at their 30th anniversary dinner last year, both grinning at the camera, lit up the screen. Honey, how did the meeting with Mr. Davidson go? Any surprises with your father's paperwork? The irony wasn't lost on me. Actually, yeah. There's a credit card that was opened in March. After Dad died. Silence stretched between us for what felt like an eternity. When she finally spoke, her voice had that shaky quality it got whenever she talked about Dad's death. Oh my goodness, that must be identity theft. These criminals, they target deceased people all the time. I saw something about it on the news. Something cold settled in my stomach. Right. Identity theft. We should call the credit card company immediately and report it. This is exactly the kind of thing that destroys families financially. Your poor father. Her voice broke, and I heard her sniffle. Even in death, people won't leave him in peace. I ended the call and immediately dialed Capital One. After 20 minutes of holds and transfers, I reached someone who could access the account details. I can confirm that card was activated on March 18th, the representative, Jessica, told me. The billing address matches what we have on file, and I show consistent usage since activation. Grocery stores, gas stations, some larger purchases at department stores. What's the billing address? She rattled off Mom's address, the house where she'd lived with Dad for 15 years, and where she still lived now. And the phone number on the account? My blood turned to ice as she read back Mom's cell phone number. After Jessica put a fraud alert on the account, I sat in my car outside the law office for another hour, scrolling through the credit report. The Capital One card wasn't alone. There was a Chase Freedom card opened in April, $4, 923.47. A Discover card from May, $2, 156.83. Even a store credit card from Nordstrom, opened just last week. Total debt racked up in my dead father's name, $18,847.22. I thought about Mom's shopping trips over the past few months, how she'd mentioned finding some good deals to cheer herself up during her grieving process. The new clothes, the expensive skincare products, the jewelry she claimed were gifts from Dad that she'd found tucked away in his closet. My father had been the most honest man I'd ever known. He returned extra change to cashiers and once drove 40 minutes back to a restaurant because they'd forgotten to charge him for dessert. The idea of his name being associated with fraud, his social security number floating around in some criminal database, made me physically sick. But what made me sicker was the realization that the criminal wasn't some stranger. It was the woman who'd stood at his funeral, sobbing into tissues while accepting condolences from friends who praised what a devoted wife she'd been. I drove straight to Mom's house, the credit report burning like evidence against my passenger seat. The familiar blue Colonial where I'd grown up looked the same as always, Dad's carefully maintained garden still blooming with the late summer flowers he'd planted before his heart attack, the porch swing where they used to drink coffee every morning still swaying slightly in the breeze. But now everything felt contaminated. Mom answered the door wearing a cream-colored cashmere sweater I'd never seen before. It looked expensive. Really expensive. Daniel. What a nice surprise. I was just about to make some tea. Earl Grey, your father's favorite. She pulled me into a hug that felt different now, tainted by what I knew. Her living room had changed since my last visit 2 weeks ago. New throw pillows on the couch, silk, with intricate beading. A crystal vase on the side table that caught the afternoon light. Fresh flowers arranged professionally, not the simple grocery store bouquets she usually bought. Mom, we need to talk about Dad's credit report. Her face immediately crumpled into that grief-stricken expression I'd seen so many times since the funeral. Oh honey, I've been so worried about that identity theft situation. Did you get it sorted out with the credit card company? I called Capital One. The card was sent to this address. This phone number is on the account. I watched her face carefully. The person who activated it knew Dad's social security number, his mother's maiden name, and his date of birth. Mom sank into Dad's old recliner, the one she'd refused to get rid of because it still smelled like his cologne. She pressed her hands to her face. I don't understand what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm asking directly. My voice came out harder than I intended. Did you open credit cards in Dad's name? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Outside, I could hear the neighbors' kids playing in their yard, their laughter a stark contrast to the suffocating tension in the room. You have to understand, she whispered, not looking at me. The grief counseling, it's so expensive. And the house payment, your father always handled the finances. I didn't realize how tight things were. My heart sank. There it was. So you committed fraud. Don't say it like that. Her voice turned sharp, defensive. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. It's not like I was stealing from strangers. This is family money, money that would have been mine anyway when we were both gone. That's not how this works, Mom. Dad is dead. You can't just. You think this has been easy for me? She stood up, and I could see her hands shaking. 32 years of marriage, and suddenly I'm alone. I don't know how to balance a checkbook or negotiate with insurance companies or figure out which bills to pay first. I was drowning, Daniel. Drowning in paperwork and debt and grief. I felt a stab of guilt, but pushed it aside. So you decided to destroy Dad's credit rating? His final credit score will show him as a deadbeat who died owing money he never intended to borrow. Her face went white. I was going to pay it back. I just needed time to get on my feet. With what money, Mom? You said yourself you're struggling with the house payment. She didn't answer, just stared at the family photo on the mantel, the last one taken of all three of us together at Christmas, Dad's arm around both of us, everyone smiling. There's more, I said quietly. Chase, Discover, Nordstrom. Almost $19,000 total. The tea kettle started whistling from the kitchen, a shrill sound that seemed to pierce right through both of us. Mom turned off the kettle but didn't make tea. Instead, she stood in the kitchen doorway, gripping the frame like she needed it for support. 19,000, she repeated, her voice hollow. It sounds so much worse when you say it all together like that. Because it is worse. I pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app where I'd been tracking everything. Capital One, $8,347. Chase, $4,923. Discover, $2,156. Nordstrom, $1,890. Target Red Card, $1,531. Should I keep going? Her face crumpled. There's more. Mom, there are 7 cards. 7. The newest one was approved 3 days ago, a Best Buy card for $2,500. What did you possibly need from Best Buy? She looked away. The television in the bedroom was acting up. Your father always said we'd replace it eventually. I stared at her in disbelief. So you bought a TV with a credit card in a dead man's name? Stop saying it like that. Her grief-stricken mask slipped, revealing something harder underneath. You act like I'm some kind of criminal. This is survival, Daniel. Do you have any idea what it costs to maintain this house? The property taxes alone are $800 a month. The insurance, the utilities, the repairs, that water heater died last week, and the replacement cost $1,200. Then sell the house. Downsize. Move somewhere you can afford. This is the house your father and I built our life in. Where we raised you. Where all our memories are. Her voice took on that martyr tone I was starting to recognize. I can't just abandon 30 years of history because money is tight. Something clicked. Mom, what happened to Dad's life insurance? She froze. What do you mean? Dad had a $50,000 policy through his work. Plus the $25,000 one we bought when I was in high school. Where's that money? The silence stretched so long I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, the one Dad had inherited from his father. There were expenses, she said finally. What expenses? The funeral cost $8,000. I know because I helped you pick the package. Her hands twisted together. The grief counseling I mentioned. And I had to take time off work after your father died. 3 months unpaid leave. The bills didn't stop just because I was too devastated to function. I did the math in my head. 3 months of her salary was maybe $9,000. Add the funeral costs, grief counseling, maybe some other legitimate expenses. That still left at least $50,000 unaccounted for. Mom, where's the rest of the insurance money? She walked back into the living room and sat down heavily. I made some investments. Your father always said I should be more aggressive with our savings. What kind of investments? A financial advisor, Gerald Hutchins. He came highly recommended. Said he could double our money within 2 years. She looked up at me with watery eyes. I thought I was being smart. Planning for the future. Your father would have wanted me to be financially secure. My stomach dropped. How much did you give him? Not all of it, she said quickly. Just, most of it. How much, Mom? 60,000. But Daniel, he promised. 60,000. I couldn't keep my voice down anymore. You gave some random advisor $60,000. While you were grieving and not thinking clearly. He wasn't random. He had an office downtown, business cards, references. And I wasn't not thinking clearly, I was trying to think about my future. About having enough money to live on. I grabbed my laptop from my bag and searched for Gerald Hutchins' financial advisor. The first result made my blood run cold. Mom. I turned the screen toward her. Is this your guy? The headline read, Local financial advisor Gerald Hutchins charged with securities fraud, investors lose over $2 million in Ponzi scheme. The article was dated 6 weeks ago. The color drained from Mom's face as she read the headline. Her hand started trembling so violently I thought she might drop my laptop. That can't be right, she whispered. Gerald showed me portfolios, profit statements. He had a whole presentation about diversified investments and compound interest. I scrolled down to read more of the article. According to this, he was operating out of a WeWork space, not a real office. The references were other victims who didn't know they were being scammed yet. I looked up at her. Mom, when exactly did you give him the money? June. Early June. She pressed her hands to her temples. He said the investment had a minimum commitment period of 18 months, so I wouldn't see returns until next December, but he was arrested in August. Which means your $60,000 is gone. I felt like I was watching our entire family's financial foundation crumble in real time. And instead of telling me about any of this, the failed investment, the money problems, any of it, you decided to commit identity theft. I was ashamed. The words burst out of her like a dam breaking. Your father trusted me with our life savings, and I lost it to some con man in a cheap suit. How was I supposed to tell you that? How was I supposed to admit that I destroyed everything your father worked for? I stared at her, trying to process the full scope of the disaster. So let me get this straight. Dad dies, leaves us $75,000 in life insurance. You give $60,000 to a scammer, spend maybe $15,000 on legitimate expenses, and when you realize you're broke, you start opening credit cards in his name instead of asking for help. She flinched like I'd slapped her. You make it sound so calculated. It wasn't like that. The first card, the Capital One, I applied for it in my own name initially. But my credit score had dropped because I'd missed some payments while I was struggling. They rejected me. So you applied again using Dad's information. I was desperate. The mortgage was due, and the bank was calling every day. I told myself it would just be once, just to get caught up, and then I'd figure out a real solution. Her voice got smaller and smaller. But then the water heater broke. And the car needed new tires. And the property taxes came due. And each time, instead of calling me, instead of calling your sister, instead of talking to literally anyone who could help, you opened another credit card. Mom's sister Janet lived in Seattle and had offered multiple times to help with expenses after Dad died. I'd offered too, though my own finances were tight as a grad student. But there had been options that didn't involve felony fraud. Janet would have just told me to sell the house, Mom said, as if reading my mind. And you're just starting your career. I didn't want to be a burden. So instead you decided to make Dad a burden. On his credit report. Forever. She started crying again, but this time it felt different. Less performative. I didn't think about it that way. I wasn't thinking clearly about anything. Some days I couldn't get out of bed. Some days I forgot to eat. The idea of calling credit card companies and banks and trying to explain that my husband was dead, that I needed help, that I'd made terrible financial decisions. She shook her head. It felt impossible. I found myself caught between fury and pity. The woman in front of me looked genuinely broken, thin in a way that suggested she really hadn't been eating regularly, dark circles under her eyes, her hair growing out gray at the roots because she'd stopped keeping up with appointments. But she'd also committed multiple felonies using my father's identity. Mom, I have to report this. Her head snapped up. What do you mean? I mean I have to call the credit card companies and tell them these accounts are fraudulent. I have to report the identity theft officially. But Daniel, if you do that. Her voice went very quiet. They'll investigate. They'll find out I did it. I could go to prison. The weight of that hung between us. My grief-stricken, financially devastated mother could actually face criminal charges. But the alternative was letting my father's credit remain destroyed and potentially being liable for nearly $20,000 in debt that would come out of his estate. Maybe there's another way, she said quickly. I could get a job, pick up extra shifts. I could sell some things, my jewelry, maybe some of the furniture. I could make payments on the cards until they're paid off. With what money? You just told me you can barely afford the mortgage. I'll figure it out. Please, Daniel. Don't destroy what's left of our family over this. I looked around the living room again, at Dad's recliner, at the family photos covering every surface, at the life they'd built together over 3 decades. In a few hours, I'd gone from thinking my biggest concern was finalizing a straightforward estate to discovering that my mother was a fraudster and my father's final legacy was a credit report full of debt he never authorized. My phone buzzed with a text from Mr. Davidson, asterisk how did the credit report look? Ready to move forward with probate next week, asterisk. Next week. I had less than a week to decide whether to turn my own mother into the authorities. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Dad's disappointed face, the same expression he'd worn when I was 12 and he caught me stealing candy from the corner store. He'd marched me back to apologize and pay for what I'd taken, then sat me down for a long talk about integrity being the only thing that truly belonged to you. Your reputation takes a lifetime to build and 5 minutes to destroy, he'd said. Don't ever let anyone take that from you, son. And don't ever take it from yourself. Now his reputation was sitting in a filing cabinet somewhere, marked with fraud alerts and unpaid debts. By 6 a.m., I was back in my car, driving to Mom's house with a plan that had crystallized somewhere between my 3rd and 4th cup of coffee. If she wanted to avoid criminal charges, we needed to move fast and smart. I found her in Dad's garden, still wearing yesterday's clothes, pulling weeds with shaking hands. The new cashmere sweater had dirt stains on the sleeves. I've been thinking all night, she said without looking up. About what you said. About Dad's reputation. Mom. I found some things I can sell. She gestured toward the porch, where she'd apparently dragged half the contents of her jewelry box. My engagement ring, the pearl necklace from our anniversary, those earrings your father bought me for Christmas. I looked them up online. I think I can get maybe $4,000 for all of it. The engagement ring sat on top of the pile, its modest diamond catching the morning sun. Dad had saved for 6 months to buy that ring when they were 23. I'd heard the story 100 times. That's not going to be enough, I said quietly. Then I'll sell more. The china set, maybe some of the furniture. That antique desk in the bedroom, your father said it might be worth something. Her voice had a manic edge to it. I'll get a second job. I'll figure it out. Mom, even if you could pay off the cards, the damage is already done. Dad's social security number is flagged in multiple fraud databases. His credit report shows him dying as a deadbeat. That doesn't just go away because the balance hits 0. She finally looked up at me, dirt streaked across her cheek. So what are you saying? I'm saying we need to file police reports. Official identity theft claims. It's the only way to clear his record completely. Her face went white. Daniel, please. But, I continued, there might be a way to do it without you going to prison. She set down the hand weeder and gave me her full attention. I talked to a criminal defense attorney this morning. Early consultation. I'd actually called 3 lawyers, burning through my emergency fund for consultation fees. If you voluntarily report the fraud, cooperate fully, and make immediate restitution, there's a chance the prosecutor might offer a plea deal. Community service, probation, maybe just restitution without jail time. But I don't have $19,000 for restitution. No, but the house is worth about $180,000. Dad owned it free and clear. I'd spent half the night researching comparable sales in her neighborhood. You sell the house, pay off the fraudulent debt, and you'll still have enough left over for a decent apartment and some savings. Mom stared at the house behind me like I'd suggested burning it down. This is our home. Dad's dead, Mom. He doesn't need the house anymore. But he needs his name cleared. Where would I live? There are nice apartments near downtown. Closer to your work, actually. Lower maintenance costs, no property taxes. I'd mapped this out too. Your social security kicks in next year when you turn 62. Between that and part-time work, you could live comfortably. She sat back on her heels, looking older than I'd ever seen her. 32 years in this house. Your first steps were in that living room. Your father proposed to me on that porch swing. And now you can't afford to keep it without committing more fraud. The harshness of my words seemed to hit her like a physical blow. But I was past the point of gentle handling. Every day we waited made things worse. What if I just stop? No more cards, no more spending. Let the accounts go into collections. Eventually they'd write them off, wouldn't they? Sure. After completely destroying Dad's credit for the next 7 years and potentially triggering a more serious investigation, I pulled out my phone and showed her screenshots from my research. Mom, identity theft of deceased persons is a federal crime. The longer this goes on, the worse it looks. Her hands went to her face. I can't go to prison, Daniel. I can't survive that. Then we do this right. Today. We call the attorney I spoke with, we file the reports, and we start the process of making this right. A car pulled into the driveway, a blue Honda I didn't recognize. A woman in her 40s got out, carrying a briefcase and looking around with the sharp assessment of someone in business. Mrs. Chin. I'm Rebecca Martinez from Martinez Real Estate. We spoke yesterday about potentially listing your home. I stared at Mom. You called a realtor. I told you I was thinking all night. Mom stood up, brushing dirt off her knees. Rebecca, this is my son Daniel. Daniel, I asked Rebecca to come give us an assessment. Just to see what our options might be. Rebecca looked between us, clearly sensing the tension. Should I come back at a better time? No, I said before Mom could answer. Actually, your timing is perfect. Rebecca's assessment was worse than I'd expected. Given the current market conditions and the needed repairs, I'd estimate your home value at around $165,000, she said, flipping through photos she'd taken of water damage in the basement and the outdated electrical panel. That's assuming you can address the foundation issues before listing. Mom's face fell. Foundation issues? There's some settling in the northeast corner. Nothing catastrophic, but buyers will want it inspected and likely repaired. I'd budget around $8,000 for that, plus another $3,000 for basic staging and repairs to get it market ready. I did the math quickly. $165,000 minus $11,000 in repairs, minus realtor fees, minus the $18,847 in fraudulent debt. Mom would walk away with maybe $130,000, enough for a small apartment and basic living expenses, but barely. After Rebecca left with promises to send a detailed market analysis, Mom and I sat on the porch swing where Dad used to drink his morning coffee. It's not enough, she said quietly. It's enough to start over. Enough to make things right. Daniel, there's something else. Her voice got very small. Something I didn't tell you yesterday. My stomach clenched. What now? The mortgage. I told you your father owned the house free and clear, but... She twisted her wedding ring around her finger. After he died, I took out a home equity line of credit. Before the Gerald situation, when I thought I was being responsible about having emergency funds available. How much? $30,000. I've used about $12,000 of it for living expenses over the past few months. The porch swing creaked as I leaned back, staring up at the ceiling where Dad had hung a small American flag that fluttered in the morning breeze. The financial picture kept getting worse with every conversation. So the house has an outstanding loan of $12,000, plus the $19,000 in credit card debt, plus repair costs. I calculated again. Mom, after everything, you're looking at maybe $115,000 left over. That's not enough to live on long term. I know. Her voice was barely a whisper. I've really destroyed everything, haven't I? Before I could answer, my phone rang. Mr. Davidson's office. Daniel, I've got some concerning news, the lawyer said after I answered. I received a call this morning from Chase Bank. Apparently someone from their fraud department has been trying to reach you about suspicious activity on an account associated with your father's social security number. I looked at Mom, who had gone pale. What kind of suspicious activity? They wouldn't give me specifics, but they want to discuss it with the estate executor, that's you, as soon as possible. I've scheduled a conference call for 2 p.m. today if you can make it. After I hung up, Mom was staring at her hands. They know, don't they? It sounds like it. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, asterisk this is Detective Sarah Chen, no relation, with the County Sheriff's Economic Crimes Unit. Please call me regarding case hashtag 2024 EC 0847 asterisk. The text was timestamped 8:47 a.m., less than an hour ago. Mom saw me reading and asked, what is it? I showed her the text. Her hand started shaking again. I think someone already reported the identity theft, I said slowly. Maybe one of the credit card companies flagged the pattern of activity. What does that mean for us? I thought about the criminal defense attorney I'd consulted earlier. He'd been clear about one thing, voluntary cooperation looked a lot better than getting caught. It means we're out of time for doing this quietly. My phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed Detective S. Chin. I looked at Mom, whose face had gone completely white. The porch swing had stopped moving, and even Dad's flag hung limp in the still air. I have to answer this, I said. Mom nodded, gripping the swing's chains like they were the only things keeping her anchored. I swiped to accept the call. This is Daniel Chen. Mr. Chen, this is Detective Sarah Chen with Economic Crimes. I need to speak with you about some irregularities we discovered related to your father's estate. Can you come in today? The police station smelled like burnt coffee and industrial disinfectant. Detective Sarah Chen turned out to be a woman in her early 40s with kind eyes but the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd seen every financial scam imaginable. She led me to a small interview room with gray walls and a table that had seen better decades. Before we begin, Mr. Chen, I want to be clear that you're not under investigation, she said, settling into her chair with a thick manila folder. We're investigating identity theft committed against your deceased father. You're here as the estate executor and potential victim. The relief I felt lasted exactly until she opened the folder. We've been tracking a pattern of suspicious credit applications using deceased person's information. Your father's social security number appeared on our radar 3 days ago when Best Buy flagged an unusual application. She pulled out a photocopy of the credit application. The applicant claimed to be Robert Chen, but the phone number belonged to Linda Chen, your mother. When Best Buy's fraud prevention team called the number, the person who answered identified herself as Linda, then quickly hung up. My mouth went dry. I see. Best Buy reports all suspicious applications to us as a matter of policy. When we ran your father's social security number, we found 6 other recent accounts. She spread out papers across the table like she was dealing cards. Capital One, Chase, Discover, Target, Nordstrom, and a Visa through First National Bank. Total fraudulent charges, $23,187.43. $23,000. I thought we'd cataloged everything at 19. There's another card. The First National Visa was opened yesterday. Someone used it to purchase $4,340 worth of appliances at Home Depot. Detective Chen's expression softened slightly. Mr. Chen, the billing address for all these accounts is 428 Maple Street. That's my mother's house. The words felt like gravel in my throat. I'm required to ask, do you have any knowledge of who might have access to your father's personal information? Social security number, date of birth, mother's maiden name. The question hung in the air between us. I could lie, claim ignorance, buy Mom more time. But Detective Chen was staring at me with the patient expression of someone who already knew the answer and was just waiting for me to say it. My mother, I said quietly. It was my mother. Detective Chen nodded like she'd been expecting this. Family members commit about 40% of deceased identity theft. The emotional and financial stress of losing a spouse can lead to poor decisions. What happens now? Now I need to speak with your mother. Is she willing to come in voluntarily, or do I need to issue a warrant? I thought about Mom at home, probably staring at her jewelry on the porch, trying to calculate how many decades it would take to pay off $23,000 by selling her wedding ring piece by piece. She'll come voluntarily. But detective, she's been struggling since my father died. She made some terrible financial decisions, lost most of their life insurance to a scammer. She's not thinking clearly. I understand. And that will be taken into consideration. But Mr. Chen, yesterday's Home Depot purchase tells me the fraud is escalating, not stopping. Someone bought a washer, dryer, and dishwasher using your father's identity. That suggests this isn't desperation spending anymore, it's become a pattern. A washer and dryer. I remembered Mom mentioning last week that her washer was making strange noises, but I'd assumed she was just complaining. Had she really bought brand new appliances with another fraudulent credit card while I was researching lawyers and trying to figure out how to save her from criminal charges? How long do I have before you need to speak with her? I'd prefer to talk to her today. The longer we wait, the more suspicious it looks. And frankly, the more purchases she makes, the harder it becomes to frame this as a grief-related lapse in judgment. I checked my phone. It was 11:30 a.m. The conference call with Mr. Davidson and Chase Bank was in 2.5 hours. Can I bring her in this afternoon? After 3 p.m. Detective Chen made a note in her file. That works. But Mr. Chen, I need you to understand something. If your mother makes any additional purchases between now and then, or if she tries to dispose of assets or leave town, this becomes a more serious matter. Right now, we're looking at potential misdemeanor fraud with restitution. But if this escalates... She didn't need to finish the sentence. I drove back to Mom's house with Detective Chen's business card burning a hole in my pocket and a sick certainty that the situation was about to get much worse. I found Mom in the basement, standing next to a gleaming new washer and dryer set that definitely hadn't been there yesterday. The Whirlpool tags were still attached, and there was a Home Depot receipt taped to the washer's lid. Mom. My voice came out flat. We need to talk. She turned around, and I could see she'd been crying. Her eyes were red and puffy, and she clutched a tissue in her shaking hands. Daniel, I can explain. $4,340. Yesterday. While I was trying to figure out how to keep you out of prison. I ripped the receipt off the washer. A First National Bank Visa card that I didn't even know existed. The old washer died completely Tuesday night. Flooded half the basement. She gestured helplessly at some damp cardboard boxes stacked against the wall. I had to do something. I couldn't afford to replace it, and I couldn't live without. So you opened another credit card. In Dad's name. Again. It was supposed to be the last one. I swear to God, Daniel, I just needed to get through this one emergency, and then I was going to stop completely. Her voice rose to that pitch it got when she was trying to convince herself as much as me. I was going to call you today and tell you about selling the house, about making payment arrangements with all the companies. I sat down heavily on Dad's old workbench, the same one where he taught me to change bike chains and fix broken toys. The basement still smelled like his workshop, WD-40 and sawdust and the Old Spice cologne that had soaked into everything he touched. Mom, I just came from the police station. The tissue fell from her hands. What? Detective Sarah Chen. Economic Crimes Unit. Best Buy flagged your application yesterday when you answered the phone as Linda instead of Robert. They reported it as identity theft. All the color drained from her face. She grabbed the edge of the washer for support, her knuckles going white. Oh God. Oh God, Daniel, what did you tell them? I told them the truth. That it was you. You turned me in. Her voice cracked like I'd physically struck her. Your own mother. They already knew, Mom. They had all the account information, all the addresses, all the phone numbers. They weren't asking me to help them figure out who did it, they were asking me to confirm what they'd already proved. She slid down the side of the washer until she was sitting on the concrete floor, her back against the brand new appliance that had just destroyed any chance of this being resolved quietly. What happens now? She whispered. You have to come in for questioning this afternoon. After 3 p.m. I checked my phone. Which means we have about 3 hours to figure out exactly how much damage we're dealing with. I pulled out my laptop and opened the spreadsheet I'd been building. Help me understand something, Mom. Yesterday morning, you were talking about selling your jewelry and getting a second job to pay off the debt. Yesterday afternoon, you called a realtor to assess the house. Yesterday evening, you were crying in Dad's garden about losing everything. I looked up at her. And yesterday night, you went online and opened another credit card to buy appliances. She stared at the floor. I wasn't thinking clearly. Or you were thinking very clearly, and you decided that since you were already in trouble, you might as well get what you needed first. That's not, she started to protest, then stopped. Her shoulders sagged. Maybe that's exactly what I thought. The honesty was somehow worse than the lies had been. Mom, the detective said if you'd stopped at the other cards, this could have been treated as grief-related poor judgment. Misdemeanor fraud, probably just restitution and community service. I gestured at the washer and dryer. But this, buying major appliances the day after a fraud investigation started, this looks like you don't care about getting caught. Like you're just going to keep going until someone physically stops you. I do care. Her voice was small and desperate. Daniel, I'm terrified. I haven't slept in 2 days. Every time the phone rings, I think it's the police or a debt collector or someone coming to arrest me. Then why did you make it worse? She was quiet for so long I thought she wasn't going to answer. Finally, she said, because I thought it might be my last chance. If I'm going to lose the house anyway, if I'm going to jail anyway, if everything is already destroyed. She shrugged helplessly. At least I'd have a working washer. The logic was so broken it made my chest ache. This was what grief and desperation had done to the woman who taught me right from wrong, who'd made me return that stolen candy 20 years ago. My phone buzzed. A text from Mr. Davidson, *, Chase Bank moved our call up to 1 p.m. Can you make it, *? 1 o'clock. 90 minutes from now. Mom, we're about to get on a conference call with Dad's estate lawyer and Chase Bank's fraud department. Then we're going to the police station. And tonight, we're going to sit down with all the bills and all the credit reports and figure out exactly how deep this hole is. And then, I looked around Dad's workshop, at his tools hanging neatly on pegboard, at the half-finished birdhouse he'd been building before his heart attack. Everything organized and purposeful and honest. Then we start digging out. The conference call with Chase Bank was worse than I'd imagined. Mr. Chen, we're showing a pattern of concerning activity that extends beyond just the Chase Freedom account, said Marcus Webb, their fraud investigator. His voice crackled through the speakerphone in Mr. Davidson's office while Mom sat beside me, clutching another tissue. We've been in communication with several other financial institutions, and there appears to be a coordinated identity theft operation targeting your father's information. Mr. Davidson leaned forward. What kind of coordination are we talking about? 7 different credit accounts opened over 6 months, with purchases ranging from everyday expenses to major appliances. The perpetrator has detailed knowledge of the deceased's personal information and has been methodical about staying under individual credit limits to avoid triggering automatic fraud alerts. I felt Mom flinch beside me. The word perpetrator seemed to hit her like a physical blow. However, Marcus continued, yesterday's Best Buy application was unusual. The applicant made several errors that suggest either desperation or escalating confidence. They answered the phone with the wrong name, provided a birth date that was off by 2 days, and when pressed for the mother's maiden name, gave Johnson instead of Johnston. Mom's face went white. I remembered her telling me once that she always got confused about whether Grandma Chen's maiden name had a T or not. What's Chase's position on recovering the fraudulent charges? Mr. Davidson asked. We'll pursue full criminal prosecution and civil recovery. The account has a current balance of $6,847.23, which will be transferred to collections pending the outcome of the criminal investigation. We're also freezing any remaining credit on the line. After we hung up, Mr. Davidson pulled off his glasses and rubbed his temples. Daniel, this is getting complicated fast. If multiple banks are coordinating their response, they're treating this as serious fraud, not just grief-related financial mistakes. What does that mean for the estate? It means we can't proceed with probate until the fraud investigation is complete. It also means that depending on how aggressive the prosecutors want to be, they could potentially seize estate assets as part of restitution. Mom spoke for the first time since the call started. Could they take the house? If the fraud amounts are high enough and you can't make full restitution, yes. It's possible. I checked my phone. 2:15 p.m. Detective Chen was expecting us in 45 minutes. Mom, we need to go. But first, I need you to answer one question honestly. I turned to face her directly. Are there any other cards? Any other accounts, applications, anything you haven't told me about? She hesitated just long enough that I knew the answer before she spoke. There's a Macy's card I applied for last week. It got approved for $1,800. Her voice was barely a whisper. And I tried to get a car loan through Ford Credit yesterday morning, but they said they needed additional documentation. Jesus, Mom. A car loan. The Honda has been making strange noises, and I thought. You thought you'd buy a car with a dead man's credit while under fraud investigation? Mr. Davidson was scribbling notes frantically. Linda, I need you to understand something. Every additional application makes this worse. Every lie you tell Daniel makes it worse. When you walk into that police station in 30 minutes, you need to be completely honest about everything, or they're going to assume you're still actively trying to defraud people. Mom started crying again, but this time it felt different. Less manipulative, more genuinely terrified. I don't know how to stop, she said through her tears. It started as just one emergency, and now every day there's something else. The car, the appliances, the insurance premium that's due next week. I wake up every morning thinking about what bills are coming and how I'm going to pay them, and the credit cards feel like the only solution. But they're not your credit cards, I said quietly. They're Dad's. And he's dead. She nodded, mascara streaking down her cheeks. I know. God help me, Daniel, I know exactly what I'm doing. The police station parking lot felt like a gauntlet. Mom sat in my passenger seat, staring at the building like it might collapse on her. She'd changed into a conservative navy dress and tried to cover the mascara damage with makeup, but her hands were still shaking. Detective Chen seems reasonable, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. If you're completely honest, if you show remorse and cooperation. Daniel. Mom's voice cut through my pep talk. There's something else. My stomach dropped. What now? She pulled a crumpled envelope from her purse with "Final Notice" stamped in red across the front. The property taxes. I missed the September payment, and they're threatening to start foreclosure proceedings. I grabbed the notice. $2,400 due immediately, plus $340 in penalties. Mom, when was this due? September 15th. I kept meaning to pay it, but then the Gerald situation happened, and I was waiting for the insurance money that never came. She trailed off. I thought I'd have it figured out by now. That was 3 weeks ago. The timeline was becoming clearer. So right around the time you opened the Discover card. I was going to use that card to pay the taxes, but then I needed groceries, and the electric bill was overdue, and it just disappeared. I did the mental math. Property taxes, plus the fraudulent debt, plus the home equity loan, plus regular living expenses. Even if she sold the house at Rebecca's estimated price, Mom would be lucky to break even. Is there anything else? Any other bills, debts, threats, cards, applications, anything? She was quiet for a long moment. The funeral home called yesterday. I still owe them $1,200 from your father's service. I've been making small payments, but they want it settled. Dad's funeral. The one expense that should have been sacred, that should have been handled with the life insurance money that went to Gerald Hutchins instead. Even in death, Dad was being cheated. We're going in now, I said, opening my car door. And Mom? No more surprises. Whatever Detective Chen asks, you tell her everything. Every card, every application, every bill, every lie. Because I guarantee she already knows most of it. Detective Chen's interview room felt smaller with Mom in it. My mother sat ramrod straight, her hands folded in her lap like she was in church, while Detective Chen arranged papers on the table with methodical precision. Mrs. Chen, I want to thank you for coming in voluntarily. That goes a long way toward showing good faith cooperation. Detective Chen's voice was professional but not unkind. I'm going to record this conversation for accuracy. Do you consent to that? Mom nodded, then cleared her throat. Yes. Can you tell me about the first credit card you opened in your deceased husband's name? It was Capital One. In March. Mom's voice was barely audible. The mortgage was due, and my own credit application had been rejected because I'd missed some payments after Robert died. What made you decide to use your husband's information instead? Mom looked down at her hands. I wasn't thinking clearly. I was grieving, I was overwhelmed with bills, and I knew all of his information by heart from 32 years of marriage. It seemed like borrowing from family money. But you knew your husband was deceased when you submitted the application? Yes. And you knew that constituted fraud? Mom hesitated. Yes. I knew it was wrong. But I told myself it was temporary, that I'd pay it back quickly. Detective Chen made notes as she spoke. Can you walk me through each subsequent account? For the next 20 minutes, Mom methodically confessed to every card, every application, every purchase. The Chase Freedom for car repairs. The Discover card for property taxes that somehow got spent on other things. Target for clothes and household items. Nordstrom for something nice to wear to grief counseling. The Home Depot purchases for appliances. What about the Best Buy application that was flagged? I needed a new television for the bedroom. The old one kept cutting out. Mom's voice got smaller with each admission. When they called to verify information, I panicked and hung up. And the Macy's card that was approved last week? I saw Mom's shoulders tense. We hadn't told Detective Chen about Macy's. How did you? Mom started, then stopped. Yes. Macy's. $1,800 limit. I spent about $400 on winter clothes. Mrs. Chen, what about the Ford credit application from yesterday morning? Mom's face went completely white. She looked at me with an expression of pure terror, then back at Detective Chen. Yes. I tried to get a car loan. But they rejected it. Detective Chen leaned back in her chair. Mrs. Chen, you applied for a car loan yesterday morning. Yesterday afternoon, you were informed that your son had discovered the fraud and would be contacting authorities. Yesterday evening, you still went online and opened the First National Bank Visa to purchase appliances. She paused. Can you help me understand that timeline? The question hung in the air like smoke. Mom opened her mouth, closed it, then looked at me desperately. I don't know, she whispered finally. I don't know how to explain it. I was scared, but I was also. I felt like everything was ending anyway. Like I might as well get what I needed while I still could. Detective Chen made more notes. Mrs. Chen, I need to ask directly, do you understand the seriousness of what you've done? Yes. Do you understand that identity theft of a deceased person is a federal crime? Yes. Are you prepared to make full restitution for the fraudulent charges? Mom looked at me again, her eyes filling with tears. I want to. But I don't have the money. I lost most of our savings to a fraudulent investment advisor. The house has liens against it. I don't know how I can pay back $23,000. Detective Chen closed her file folder. Mrs. Chen, based on your cooperation today and the circumstances involved, I'm going to recommend that the prosecutor's office consider a plea agreement. However, the escalating pattern of applications, including attempts made after you knew you were under investigation, makes this more serious than typical grief-related fraud. What does that mean? Mom asked. It means you're likely looking at felony charges instead of misdemeanor. But given your age, your circumstances, and your cooperation, you'll probably be offered a plea deal that focuses on restitution and probation rather than jail time. Mom nodded, tears streaming down her face. However, Detective Chen continued, that's contingent on no further fraudulent activity. Mrs. Chen, if you make even one more purchase, submit even one more application, or access any of these accounts again, the plea offer disappears and you'll face the full weight of federal prosecution. Do you understand? Yes, Mom whispered. Good. Don't leave town without notifying my office. We'll be in touch within the week about next steps. As we walked back to my car, Mom grabbed my arm. Daniel, what am I going to do? I looked back at the police station, then at my mother, this woman who'd raised me to be honest and was now facing felony charges for fraud. We're going to figure it out, Mom. But first, you're going to give me every credit card, debit card, and checkbook you have. All of them. Daniel. All of them. Tonight. Because if you make one more purchase in Dad's name, they're going to send you to prison. She nodded, but I could see something flickering behind her eyes, that same desperate calculation I'd been seeing for days. I wasn't sure I could trust her not to try one more time. We were halfway home when Mom's phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and her face went ashen. It's Janet, she said, referring to her sister in Seattle. She only calls when something's wrong. Answer it, I said. Maybe she can help. Mom swiped to accept the call and put it on speaker. Hi, Janet. Linda, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for hours. Janet's voice was tight with worry. I got a very strange call from someone claiming to be from Chase Bank's fraud department. They said they were investigating identity theft related to Robert's accounts and needed to verify some information with family members. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. The banks were calling extended family now. They asked if I had access to Robert's social security number, if I knew about any credit cards in his name, if you'd mentioned any financial difficulties. Janet paused. Linda, what's going on? Robert's been dead for 8 months. Mom stared at the phone like it was a venomous snake. Janet, Please don't tell me you did something stupid with his information. Please tell me this is just some scammer trying to get personal details. The silence stretched until Janet's sharp intake of breath told us she'd figured it out. Oh, Linda. Oh, honey, what have you done? It wasn't supposed to happen like this, Mom whispered. I lost the insurance money to a con man, and I was behind on everything, and I just needed. You opened credit cards in your dead husband's name? Janet's voice rose an octave. Linda, that's fraud. That's prison time. I know. Mom's composure finally cracked completely. I know what I did, okay? I know how it sounds. But you don't understand what it's been like. 32 years of marriage, and suddenly I'm supposed to figure out taxes and insurance and mortgage payments and car repairs all by myself while I can barely get out of bed most days. So you call family. You ask for help. You don't commit felonies. I pulled into a grocery store parking lot and put the car in park. This conversation needed my full attention. Janet, I said, the police are already involved. Mom just finished giving a statement. The banks have frozen the accounts and started criminal proceedings. Jesus Christ, Daniel. How much money are we talking about? 23,000. Maybe more. Janet was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was calmer but deadly serious. Linda, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I'm flying out tomorrow morning. Don't sign anything, don't talk to anyone else without a lawyer present, and for the love of God, don't make any more purchases. I won't, Mom said quickly. I mean it, Linda. Not groceries, not gas, not a pack of gum. Use cash for everything until we sort this out. Janet paused. And Daniel, you need to take control of her finances immediately. Like, today. All bank cards, credit cards, checkbooks, everything. I was planning to. Good. Because your mother clearly can't be trusted to make rational decisions right now. Mom flinched like she'd been slapped, but she didn't argue. After we hung up, Mom stared out the passenger window at families loading groceries into their cars, normal people dealing with normal problems. She's right, Mom said finally. I can't be trusted. 8 months ago I was a respected widow dealing with grief. Now I'm a criminal who might go to prison. She turned to look at me. How did I get here, Daniel? I thought about the timeline, Dad's death in February, the insurance scammer in June, the first credit card in March. Each decision seeming reasonable in isolation but adding up to something monstrous. One choice at a time, I said. And now we fix it the same way. But as we drove home, I couldn't shake the feeling that the worst revelations were still coming. Back at Mom's house, I watched her gather credit cards from purses, drawers, and jacket pockets like she was surrendering weapons. The pile on the kitchen table grew disturbingly large, 12 cards total, including ones I'd never heard of. Mom, what's this Capital One Saver card? That's different from the venture card we already found. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I got declined for a credit increase on the venture, so I applied for a different Capital One product. They approved me for $3,000. I added it to my spreadsheet. The debt total climbed to $26,847. When? Last Thursday. Last Thursday. 3 days before Detective Chin called me. My voice cracked with disbelief. Mom, you were opening new cards while already under investigation. I didn't know about the investigation yet. Her defensiveness flared up again. How was I supposed to know Best Buy would report anything? I stared at her, this woman who taught me that honesty was non-negotiable, who made me apologize to neighbors when my baseball broke their window. Because fraud is illegal, Mom. Because you knew what you were doing was wrong. My phone buzzed with an email from Mr. Davidson, * Daniel, received concerning call from Discover Card. They're expediting their fraud investigation timeline. Please call ASAP, *. We're not done with the surprises, are we? I showed Mom the email. What else is Discover going to tell us? Mom's face crumpled. I may have used the Discover Card as a cash advance. To pay some of the minimum payments on the other cards. The room started spinning. You took cash advances on Dad's fraudulent credit cards to pay off other fraudulent credit cards. It was only twice. Maybe 3 times. Just to keep everything current so nothing would get flagged. I calculated frantically. Cash advances came with immediate interest and fees. How much, Mom? Around $4,000 total. The debt number jumped to over $30,000. At this rate, even selling the house wouldn't cover restitution. Jesus Christ, Mom. You turned this into a pyramid scheme using a dead man's identity. Before she could respond, the doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw a woman in a business suit holding an official-looking envelope. Mom peered over my shoulder and went white. That's a process server. I recognize her from when the Millers got divorced. I opened the door to find a no-nonsense woman in her 50s. I'm looking for Linda Chen. That's me, Mom said weakly from behind me. You're being served with a civil complaint from Chase Bank regarding fraudulent charges and identity theft. You have 30 days to respond. She handed Mom the thick envelope and walked away without another word. Mom's hands shook as she opened the papers. They're suing me for $8,347 plus interest, legal fees, and punitive damages. They want. She squinted at the fine print. $25,000 total. I snatched the papers from her. The legal language was dense, but the message was clear. Chase wanted full restitution, court costs, attorney fees, and triple damages for willful fraud. Mom, if every bank sues like this. I did the math. 7 cards, each seeking triple damages. You're looking at over $100,000 in civil liability. She collapsed into Dad's recliner, the one that still smelled like his cologne. I'm going to lose everything, aren't I? My phone rang. Janet's number. Daniel, I just got off the phone with a criminal defense attorney in your area. We need to move fast. Janet's voice was tense. The lawyer says if multiple banks are filing civil suits this quickly, they're coordinating with federal prosecutors for a major fraud case. What does that mean? It means they're not treating this as grief-related poor judgment anymore. They're treating your mother like a career criminal. My blood ran cold. But she's not a career criminal. She's a grieving widow who made terrible decisions. That's not how it looks on paper, Daniel. Multiple accounts over 6 months, escalating amounts, cash advances to pay other fraudulent cards. This has all the hallmarks of organized fraud. Janet's voice was grim. The attorney says we need character witnesses, medical records showing her mental state after Robert's death, anything that proves this was grief-induced impairment rather than calculated theft. I looked at Mom, who was staring at the Chase Bank lawsuit like it might burst into flames. What about her grief counseling records? That's a start, but Daniel, there's something else. The attorney ran a preliminary background check, and your mother has been busy. Papers rustled on Janet's end. Did you know she opened a checking account at Wells Fargo last month using Robert's social security number? What? I spun to face Mom, who had gone completely pale. Mom, tell me you didn't open a bank account. She pressed her hands to her face. I needed somewhere to deposit the cash advances without triggering alerts on my regular account. You opened a fraudulent bank account to launder money from fraudulent credit cards. The words felt surreal coming out of my mouth. Mom, that's money laundering. That's organized crime territory. I wasn't laundering money. Her voice cracked with desperation. I was just trying to keep track of everything separately. The grief counselor said organization was important for managing stress. Janet's voice cut through the phone. Linda, please tell me you didn't write checks from that account. Mom's silence was answer enough. Oh, for fuck's sake, Janet muttered. Linda, checks are paper trails. Every check you wrote creates evidence of ongoing fraud. I grabbed Mom's purse and dumped it onto the kitchen table. Among the credit cards was a Wells Fargo checkbook I'd never seen before. The register showed entries dating back 3 weeks, $800 to Peterson Plumbing for bathroom repairs, $1,200 to Miller's Auto for car maintenance, $340 for the property tax penalty. You've been writing checks from a dead man's bank account for home repairs. I flipped through the register. Mom, you wrote a check to the grief counselor. You paid for therapy to deal with Dad's death using Dad's fraudulently obtained money. The irony was so twisted it made my chest hurt. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Agent Patricia Reeves, FBI Financial Crimes Division. Please contact me regarding case FC 2024-1847. FBI. We'd graduated from local police to federal agents. I showed the text to Mom, whose face went from pale to gray. Federal. Identity theft across state lines, organized banking fraud, money laundering. Yeah, Mom, you've hit the federal trifecta. I dialed Agent Reeves before I could lose my nerve. Agent Reeves. This is Daniel Chen. You texted about contacting you. Mr. Chen, thank you for calling promptly. I need to schedule interviews with both you and your mother regarding fraudulent financial activity associated with your father's identity. Her voice was crisp, professional, terrifying. Given the scope of the alleged crimes, we're treating this as a priority case. What scope are we talking about? Preliminary investigation shows fraudulent activity totaling approximately $47,000 across 11 financial institutions, including interstate wire transfers and potential money laundering through multiple accounts. 47,000. The number kept growing like cancer. Agent Reeves, my mother isn't a criminal mastermind. She's a grief-stricken widow who lost their life savings to a scammer and made increasingly desperate choices. I understand the circumstances, Mr. Chen. That's why we prefer to handle this cooperatively. But I need both of you at our field office tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. And Mr. Chen, your mother should bring an attorney. After I hung up, Mom was rocking slightly in Dad's chair, clutching one of his old sweaters. $47,000, she whispered. How is it $47,000? I thought about the Wells Fargo account, the cash advances, the interest and fees compounding daily. Because you didn't just commit fraud, Mom. You built an entire financial ecosystem around fraud. Janet's voice crackled through the speakerphone we'd forgotten was still connected. Daniel, we need that attorney tonight. Federal cases move fast, and if your mother walks into that FBI interview unprepared, she's going to prison. The criminal defense attorney Janet found looked like he'd stepped out of a legal thriller, expensive suit, silver hair, the kind of confident demeanor that probably cost $500 an hour. Robert Kelman had agreed to meet us at 7 p.m. on short notice, which Janet warned me meant he was either very good or very desperate for clients. Mrs. Chen, I've reviewed the preliminary information your sister-in-law provided, he said, spreading documents across the conference table in his downtown office. I need to be frank with you about the situation you're facing. Mom sat rigidly in her chair, still clutching Dad's sweater like a security blanket. How bad is it? Federal prosecutors don't typically get involved in simple credit card fraud cases. The fact that the FBI has opened a file suggests they believe this involves sophisticated criminal activity. Kelman pulled out a legal pad covered in notes. Wire fraud across state lines, money laundering, identity theft of a deceased person. We're looking at potential sentences of 10 to 15 years if convicted on all counts. The blood drained from Mom's face. 15 years. I'd be in my 70s when I got out. That's if you're convicted on everything, which is unlikely given your circumstances. But Mrs. Chen, I need you to understand something. Kelman leaned forward. The pattern of behavior documented here doesn't read like grief-induced poor judgment. It reads like systematic criminal enterprise. I pulled out my phone and showed him the latest email from Mr. Davidson. It gets worse. The estate lawyer says 3 more banks filed civil suits today. Bank of America, American Express, and something called Synchrony Bank that I've never heard of. Synchrony handles store credit cards, Kelman said grimly. Mrs. Chen, how many retail credit accounts did you open? Mom's voice was barely a whisper. I don't remember exactly. Maybe 6. 7. When you're in the store and they offer you 20% off for applying, it seems like. Jesus Christ, Mom. I cut her off. PayPal credit, Amazon store card, Best Buy, Nordstrom, Macy's. I counted on my fingers. That's at least 12 total financial institutions you've defrauded. Kelman made more notes. The federal guidelines treat each account as a separate count of wire fraud. 12 counts puts us in mandatory minimum territory. What does that mean? Mom asked. It means even with a plea deal, you're probably looking at prison time. The question is whether it's 2 years or 10. My phone buzzed with another unknown number. At this point, I was afraid to answer calls, but I recognized the area code as local. This is Sergeant Mike Torres with the County Sheriff's Asset Forfeiture Unit. Are you Daniel Chen? Asset forfeiture. They were coming for the house. Yes, this is Daniel. Mr. Chen, we've received court orders to inventory and potentially seize assets related to case FC 2024-1847. We'll be at 428 Maple Street tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. to conduct a preliminary assessment. Wait, what assets? The house? Any assets that may have been purchased with proceeds from fraudulent activity, yes sir. We'll have a complete list of items to be evaluated. After he hung up, Kelman was shaking his head. They're moving incredibly fast. Asset forfeiture before arraignment usually means they have very strong evidence of ongoing criminal activity. What kind of evidence? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Bank records showing the flow of fraudulent funds, probably. If your mother used the Wells Fargo account to pay for home improvements, car repairs, even groceries, they can argue those purchases were made with criminal proceeds. Mom looked around the conference room like she was seeing it for the first time. They're going to take my house. The house Robert and I bought when Daniel was 3 years old. Most likely, yes. If the total fraud amount exceeds the equity in the house, they'll seize it for restitution. Kelman checked his watch. Mrs. Chen, I need to ask you directly, is there anything else? Any other accounts, any other financial activity you haven't disclosed? Mom was quiet for so long I thought she'd fallen asleep. Finally, she reached into her purse and pulled out a credit card I'd never seen before. There's one more, she said, placing it on the table like evidence in a murder trial. A Citi double cash card. I got it approved this morning. The room went completely silent. Kelman stared at the card, then at Mom, then at me. You got approved for a new credit card this morning. His voice was deadly quiet. 12 hours before your FBI interview. I was scared, Mom whispered. I thought maybe I could get enough to hire a better lawyer, or pay for bail, or... Mrs. Chen, you applied for credit while under federal investigation. Kelman stood up abruptly. Do you understand what you've just done? I felt like the floor was collapsing under me. Mom, please tell me you haven't used it. She pulled out her phone and showed me a notification. I got gas this afternoon. And I stopped at the grocery store. Her voice cracked. I spent maybe $60 total. Kelman was packing his briefcase. Mrs. Chen, I can't represent you. What? Why not? Because you've just demonstrated that you intend to continue committing crimes even while facing federal prosecution. That makes you a liability I can't afford. He snapped his briefcase closed. Find another attorney. And Mrs. Chen, don't make any more purchases between now and your arraignment, or you'll be looking at obstruction of justice charges on top of everything else. After he left, Mom and I sat in the empty conference room staring at the Citi card on the table. Mom, I said finally, what the hell is wrong with you? She started crying again, but this time it sounded different. Hollow. Like she was finally out of tears and just going through the motions. I don't know, Daniel. I honestly don't know. The next morning, I watched from the driveway as sheriff's deputies cataloged everything in Mom's house that might have been purchased with fraudulent money. Which, it turned out, was almost everything acquired in the past 8 months. Kitchen appliances, $4,340. Living room furniture set, estimated $2,800. Jewelry and clothing items, approximately $3,200. Deputy Martinez read from her tablet while her partner photographed each item. Mr. Chen, will need documentation showing what was owned prior to February 2024 versus what was purchased after your father's death. I handed over the homeowner's insurance inventory Dad had meticulously maintained, because of course he had documentation for everything. The contrast was brutal, Dad's careful records of legitimate purchases versus Mom's 8-month spending spree funded by identity theft. Mom sat in Dad's recliner, still in her bathrobe, watching strangers put orange asset forfeiture stickers on her life. She hadn't said a word since the deputies arrived. Ma'am, we're also seizing the Wells Fargo account and any connected payment methods, Deputy Martinez said gently. Do you have any other accounts we should know about? Mom looked at me with hollow eyes. Tell them about the PayPal account. What PayPal account? But even as I asked, I knew. There was always one more secret with her. I linked it to Robert's social security number for online purchases. There's maybe $800 in there. Deputy Martinez added it to her list. Anything else? A Venmo account. A Cash App. I think there might be a Zelle account too. Mom's voice was mechanical, like she was reading ingredients off a cereal box. I don't remember exactly. I stared at her in amazement. You built an entire digital financial empire using Dad's identity. I was trying to organize everything separately so I could pay it back easier, she said weakly. With what money, Mom? You never had a plan to pay any of this back. The FBI interview 3 hours later was a masterclass in bureaucratic precision. Agent Reeves laid out printed bank statements, credit reports, and transaction histories that painted a timeline of systematic fraud spanning 8 months and 13 financial institutions. Mrs. Chen, can you explain this $1,200 payment to Miller's Auto Shop on September 14th? Agent Reeves pointed to a highlighted line on the Wells Fargo statement. Car maintenance, Mom answered quietly. Paid for with a check from an account opened fraudulently in your deceased husband's name. Yes. And this $340 payment to the county tax assessor on September 18th? Property tax penalty. Also paid with fraudulent funds. Agent Reeves worked through dozens of transactions with methodical patience. Gas stations, grocery stores, department stores, online retailers. Each purchase another count of wire fraud, another piece of evidence that this wasn't grief-induced confusion but calculated criminal behavior. Mrs. Chen, the total fraudulent amount now stands at $52,847 across 14 accounts and payment systems, Agent Reeves said finally. Do you understand the severity of these charges? Yes, Mom whispered. Are you prepared to enter a guilty plea and cooperate with restitution efforts? Mom looked at me one last time, really looked at me, like she was seeing me for the first time in months. Daniel, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I destroyed everything your father worked for. Mrs. Chen. Agent Reeves prompted. Mom straightened in her chair with something that almost looked like dignity. Yes. I'll plead guilty to all charges. 6 weeks later, I stood in a federal courthouse watching my mother receive her sentence, 18 months in minimum security prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation and $52,847 in restitution. The house would be sold, the proceeds going toward victim compensation. But Dad's credit report had been cleared. Every fraudulent account closed, every false debt erased. His social security number was clean, his financial legacy restored. The revenge wasn't the prison sentence or the asset forfeiture. It was watching Mom finally understand that actions have consequences, that grief doesn't justify fraud, and that Dad's memory deserved better than being used as a criminal's cover story. As they led her away in handcuffs, she turned back one last time. Take care of your father's garden, she called out. He'd want the flowers to keep blooming. I nodded, knowing I would. Some legacies are worth preserving. Even when the people who should have protected them are not.